you will get left a little bit behind. We'll talk more about that in a moment. The e-content from last week started the process of the preliminary report, which is for you to identify some academic skills for student success. If you have not completed that Padlet post in last week's e-content, please do so. Yep, you can ask questions in the chat. Please complete the ePadlet post before your tutorial this week. And I'll just look at my notes there. My last note is it's never too late to join study groups. So if you haven't joined study groups yet, you might want to consider joining a study group for the completion of the report. Again, study groups are very popular in faculty in your future semesters. Students in faculty, they seek out and create their own study groups. The teachers don't have to remind students to do that because they know how important the study groups are. Karam's just got a question about images. Unsplash is the website that I prefer to use because it gives you, for images, because it gives you a person's first name and family name. So it makes it very easy for you to complete your in-text citation and the reference list. All right, let's get into the workshop and have some time at the end to talk about 3A in more detail. What are we focusing on this week? This week we are focusing on the skills of direct quoting, paraphrasing, and summarizing. You have done some of this already for the oral presentation in more of a informal way, because the paraphrasing, I suppose, that you were doing for the oral presentation was more verbal paraphrasing about your supporting points. The in-text citations that you were using on your slides was the basic form of in-text citations that we use on PPT slides. We want to upgrade these skills now for your written assignments. So that's what we're going to be focusing on in this workshop. We're going to have a look at a couple of different things. The first is direct quoting. Then we'll move into more detail on paraphrasing, seeing that paraphrasing is the most common method of using ideas from secondary sources. We'll have a look at in-text citations and the various ways you can integrate evidence. Then we'll briefly look at referencing, and then we'll get into more detail about the 3A preliminary report. If you have any questions, put them into the chat for the main room, because questions are always good. In the last workshop, there were a few questions, so I'm happy to answer those questions as they go into the chat. In the meantime, we'll get started on the difference between these three forms of using ideas from secondary sources. Some of them you probably already know, but just remember that there are specific details about each of these that you need to know for your studies at university. So let's start off with paraphrasing. Now, I'm using this source from Turner et al. You can see I've got the in-text citation down below. That reminds me about your oral presentations. Some students did not have any in-text citations on their slides, so it was difficult to give you a grade for the use of sources. Some students did have in-text citations on their slides for their ideas, but they did not verbally connect the author's name with the idea. That was part of interaction. So remember, we're trying to increase the skills so you can get a higher grade. There's already some skills there that weren't demonstrated for some students, for a lot of students actually, not just some. And that's why I'm mentioning it now, seeing that we're in the middle of marking the oral presentations. All right, paraphrasing and what is it? This is a good table from Turner et al. Turner et al. Being in the QUT readings for this website. It's the first source there. It says under the question, what is it? Paraphrasing is writing an idea, such as a supporting point, from the literature. Literature is a synonym for secondary source, in your own words for your own purpose. A couple of important points there. We know, most students know that paraphrasing is the student's own words. It's totally different from the original sentence. But what they do forget a little bit is for your own purpose, which we have talked about before when we've been discussing deconstructing to reconstruct, when we've lately been talking about critical thinking of the idea in the secondary source. So it's important for you to identify a word or a phrase that is the idea, and then close the source, the ebook or the journal article, and then start writing the paraphrase for your own purpose. Your own purpose is the focus of your assignment, whatever that assignment may be. For the report, we're working for the client again, which is on the same topic of student academic success. If you focus on a full sentence that is in the secondary source, you will get into a little bit of difficulty because you will be doing two things that are a problem. The first thing that you will be doing is trying not to copy the direct sentence. So you're going to be trying to look for synonyms, and you're going to be trying to change the words, the word order and things like that, which is not the best way to paraphrase. Secondly, what you'll be doing is you'll be getting confused with the author's purpose. When you look at a complete sentence from an ebook or a journal article, it's very difficult to get away from the meaning of that sentence. So we don't want to get caught up in the author's meaning. We want to get caught up in the author's idea, but not the purpose of that idea that the author has used. We need to connect it to our own purpose. I'm not saying it's easy, but that's the strategy that we have to use. Otherwise, we're going to get into a bit of difficulty, which could confuse your ideas when you're writing your paraphrases in your paragraphs. Okay, when do you use paraphrasing? Very frequently. I'll get to that, Karam. So paraphrasing we use for about 80 to 90% of our ideas that are used from secondary sources. Quoting we use occasionally, so about 10 to 20%, and I'll show you two different ways of direct quoting in a moment, which are important for you to understand, because most students, when they quote, yes, they do use the exact words, but they tend to direct quote a sentence or a long phrase, which we don't want to get into for the same reasons for our strategy for paraphrasing. But yes, when we use a quote, we use the exact words. You'll notice the word exact here is in quotation marks or inverted commas, so that when the reader reads that sentence, they know that that exact word or phrase is from the secondary source and it is not your word or phrase, you're borrowing it. Most likely, that exact word or phrase will be highlighted when you submit that text to Turnitin. If you are submitting an assignment to Turnitin with paraphrasing, there should be no similarity matching. So what you need to do is don't wait until the week of your submission to upload to Turnitin. When the link is open, so if I remember, the 3A preliminary report Turnitin link is opening next Monday. From next Monday, you can start uploading Word documents with paragraphs in it that you've written, just to check the similarity matching through Turnitin. That's your checking mechanism. However, I sort of think that once a student understands their strategy for paraphrasing and quoting, they will know when something will be highlighted as similarity. So I think that maybe as you move forward in your studies, you will already know what is the right way of paraphrasing and direct quoting and what is the wrong way. Summarizing is something that I'm going to briefly talk about because we don't require any summarizing in this unit. However, you probably will summarize in some future unit. So let's just talk about it briefly. Summarizing is when you write a summary of an argument or idea. You are writing the summary in your own words. Summaries are often broader topics. So if we looked at an ebook chapter, we might summarize the main argument or the main focus in that chapter. Whereas when we're paraphrasing and direct quoting, we're looking for more specific ideas within the paragraphs themselves. One thing to remember about summarizing is that even though we write the summary in our own words, I'm going to highlight this in a different color because it is important for you to know, but we keep the author's purpose. So that's something that we don't do for paraphrasing, for example, or for quoting when we do quoting the academic way, which I'm going to show you. We use summarizing occasionally in an essay or a report. So not very often do we actually use it. There are other ways in which we summarize, and that is for other assignments such as literature reviews and ABs or annotated bibliographies. You may be familiar with some of those, which you will use in your future studies. So just the question from Karam about references. We're going to talk about the difference between an in-text citation and a reference in a moment. But yes, every in-text citation that you use in your paragraphs must also have a reference entry at the end of your assignment. So we're looking at a match. Just like in this case, I've got Turner et al. Here, and I would have to have a Turner et al. Reference at the end of this slide. So if we just go to the reference list, you'll see down the bottom it has Turner, Cranus, Island, and Poynton. The reason why we use et al. Is because in APA rules, if there is a source with 3 or more authors, then for the in-text citation, we use the first author's family name and et al. But in the reference list, we have to show all of the authors' names. This is actually the reference entry that you should have used for the formative assessment if you didn't. So we've got Turner, Cranus, Island, and Poynton 2011. We have the while I've got it open, I might as well talk to you about it. We have the title of the book, which is Essential Academic Skills. Notice two things about the title. The title is in italics, meaning it's on its side on an angle, and it also only has the first word with a capital letter. The other words have a small a for academic and a small s for skills. There is the publisher. Because this is a printed book, there is no electronic link which would take me to the ebook. You'll notice up the top where I've used a journal article, it is an online journal article, and I have the electronic link there which will take me to the journal article. We'll see how we go. I don't really want to focus too much on the references just yet, but if we have a little bit of time at the end, we will do that. All right, and any other questions about in-text citations or referencing, put them into the chat, because I know these are complicated, okay? But one of the things, unfortunately or fortunately, is that you are going to be repeatedly writing in-text citations and repeatedly writing reference entries. So you really do want to try to understand as much as you can as you progress in your studies. Do we expect them to be perfect? No. In actual fact, for the oral presentation, we're looking that you have a reference list, okay? If you've got a reference list, that's great. If you've got an in-text citation, that's great. Are we worried too much about family names or initials or italics or capital letters? Not as much for the oral presentation. All right, let's have a look at what is commonly discussed when we are talking about paraphrasing and direct quoting, and that is academic integrity. So I do want to do that now because it's a reminder to you. Academic integrity is closely connected to the way in which you use secondary sources, such as ebooks and journal articles. Just remember that academic integrity or plagiarism is closely connected to either intentional or unintentional mistakes. So I'll talk about that in a moment when I talk about Turnitin and looking at similarity again. All right, let's give me a break and let's go to you guys. Song Nguyen, could you read out the first paragraph for us and put your webcam on, thanks?
Oh, hello. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah. There are many reasons for the increase in academic dishonesty, one of which is a lack of ethical awareness and related lack of maturity to take into consideration the long-term consequence of the act.
Okay, thank you. Just next time, put your camera on, and I think I've got the wrong Nguyen. Thanks, great. But I want Song to do the next one for me, okay? Thank you for reading that out, and I can see your cam, that's good. So let's look at the first one, and then Song, if Song is there, will read the second one. All right, in these two uses texts from Gunnison et al. Are important because the research that Gunnison et al. Focused on is academic dishonesty and what some of the problems that students find about academic integrity. And I do prefer academic integrity because academic integrity doesn't have a negative focus. Academic dishonesty has a negative focus. So I want to sort of get away from the negative focus that we're talking about here. I like to look at things in a positive way. So in the first example, it says there are many reasons for the increase in academic dishonesty. And it lists some of the reasons. One of which is the lack of ethical awareness, the lack of maturity from students. Now, these are not just international students, they're all students. Loretta would have given you a workshop or a lecture, I think she called it, on academic integrity earlier on in the year. And if there's enough students that would be interested, I'm sure she would do a follow-up one as we come into our first written assignments. So let me know if you would be interested in Loretta doing another academic integrity workshop with you. So let's talk about these forms of academic dishonesty, or some of the reasons for academic dishonesty for students that was found in the research. The first is the lack of awareness when it comes to ethics. Ethics means the right or the wrong way of doing something. So a student or an employee, because academic integrity is also a part of the workplace as well. We're not just focusing on students here, although the research did in the Gunnison research. It is important that you understand what is right and what is wrong. Before I mentioned intentional academic dishonesty and unintentional academic dishonesty. Intentional academic dishonesty is when a student or an employee is aware of the ethical considerations or the right and the wrong, and they choose to do the wrong thing. Let's say copy from a source or copy from another employee. Then there's the unintentioned academic dishonesty. That is when the student or the employee is not aware of the right or the wrong way to use other sources. Unfortunately, in most cases, when you're at university or in the workplace, it doesn't matter if you're aware or unaware of the rules. If you do have academic dishonesty in your assignments or in the workplace, there are specific consequences for that mistake. Okay, so you can't sort of say, oh, well, I didn't know the rules. Unfortunately, we do talk about it quite a lot in all units, to be honest, and there's lots of information on the QUT site as well. Lack of maturity. Obviously, if you are a new student at university, then you won't have the maturity of knowledge to know the consequences or the long-term consequences of being aware of academic integrity issues. For example, one of the long-term consequences is that if there is a case of academic dishonesty for a student, it stays on your file throughout your studies at university. And if there's too many cases that happen, then the consequences become more severe as your studies progress. So we really do give you a lot of information to help you in regards to your understanding of the rules required. And again, checking in Turnitin is an easy way to check if there's any similarity problems. Now, Song, are you able to use your microphone and your webcam to read this second paragraph, please? Okay, I'm going to give Song another chance, and then I'm going to have to, well, I actually did give Song a chance before. So Song, I'm going to have to remove you if you're not going to make some sort of contact. Okay, so if anyone's a friend of Song, can you let him or her know that I have removed them from the workshop because they're not responding. Soichiro, Mori, do you want to read this third one for me, please?
Can you hear me?
Hi, Soichiro. Yes, does your webcam work, Soichiro?
Sorry. No, I don't know how to.
Soichiro, we are in week 7 now, so you're going to have to make sure that that is corrected, okay?
Okay, sorry.
Okay, read out that paragraph for us, please.
Okay. In addition, insufficient language skills, a lack of skills for using information, unfamiliarity with Western scholarly tradition, and pressure to achieve the study result are cited to be causes of plagiarism.
Great, thank you, Soichiro. And look, I understand that students, it's never an easy decision where to locate yourself when you have an online class, and I understand that. So some of you won't be at home, you'll be maybe in a shopping center or something like that. That's fine with me. I understand that, so don't worry about that. If there's background noise or if we can see other people in the background when you are showing your cam, that's fine. I understand everybody is doing their best for their studies, okay? So don't worry about that. All right, so Soichiro focused on this second paragraph, which is giving some reasons why students maybe have some trouble with well, if you're hungry, of course. I mean, you know, although it's not a very long class, so I don't know if you really do. You don't want to be eating while you've got the camera on, of course. So insufficient language skills, that can be a reason why some students have trouble with academic integrity. Now, that specific reason is not just for students whose first or second language is not English. That is also for students whose first language is English. They will have insufficient academic language skills, which can cause some problems for them. Also, the research focused on the lack of skills in using information, such as paraphrasing. Okay, that is the deconstructing to reconstruct. Maybe they are not comfortable or confident enough to do that yet, and that has caused some problems with their academic integrity. The third reason that was mentioned in Gunnison et al. Is the unfamiliarity with Western scholarly traditions or expectations. So university expectations. Maybe they are familiar with their previous education when they have used direct quoting, when they have used paraphrasing, or when they've used secondary sources. And these are now a little bit different from what the expectations are here in a Western university. So I understand that as well. It means that you need to be an active learner and an active listener to identify those differences on your previous past experience and the experience that you need to demonstrate now. Now, the last point here is important. So I'm going to, we haven't talked about this yet, so I might do this in pink. The pressure to achieve study results is one of the reasons that causes plagiarism. Now, I want to talk about this for a moment because academic integrity is not just focused on your use of secondary sources, such as ebooks and journal articles, and maybe for some other assignments, websites. But often when you are working in a study group and you share information with another student, that can cause some academic integrity issues. So what do we mean by that? Well, firstly, study groups are a popular way at university to help students efficiently be successful in their units. I know I don't think a lot of you believe me just yet, but you will when it gets into your future semesters. The problem with study groups is that some students use study groups in the wrong way. For example, they will share completed assignments with other students. We actually don't do that at university. If you want to share information with other students in a study group, you would share maybe a couple of sentences or part of a paragraph. You wouldn't share a full completed paragraph with another student. Why? Well, you might trust the other student and they might be a very good student. However, there is this word here, pressure. We know, let me get yellow. Where's my yellow? We know that that pressure can cause stress, and that in the past there have been students that will use another student's work because they ran out of time and they got stressed when they were completing their assignment. They didn't mean to, they didn't have the intention of copying from another student, but unfortunately they ended up doing that to submit an assignment. The problem there is that that will all be similar to another student's work, and that will affect also the original owner of the work, so the first student. So please be very careful when you are sharing information with other students. But more importantly, there are lots of resources available at QUT to reduce the stress that you may have. Don't be afraid of making contact with your teachers or the welfare ladies and gentlemen. You have paid for some of these resources, so you may as well use them if you need to. Pressure. I think that's what I was going to talk about there. All right, I want to use this slide to talk about the in-text citations that are on this slide for a moment. In the first paragraph, you can see that there are 3 different sources that have been used. There's the 2009 source, the 2003 source, and the 2007 source. This is an example of something called citation stacking. If we stack something, we stack one on top of the other, like boxes. Put one box, we stack on another box. This is the same academically when we find more than one secondary source that is talking about the same idea as another secondary source. It's a good opportunity to show a teacher how you have made a connection between 2 sources or more than 2 sources with the same idea. In this case, Gunnison et al. Has done that by finding these 3 different sources. So you may want to do that as you're investigating your subtopics for the report. Just remember, one of the reasons I'm mentioning this is the majority of students do this in the wrong way. They will actually copy the in-text citation from their secondary source that is not their own sources that they've found. So if we went to the Gunnison source, in the reference list, it would have a reference entry for Kolnerod and Rosander 2009. It would have a separate reference entry for Liddell 2003, and it would have a separate reference entry for Sisti 2007. So if you are going to use back-to-back citations, and maybe you want to practice just doing it once, Make sure that each of these sources has a corresponding reference entry at the end of your report. I'll come to that, Ibrahim, in a moment. I want to talk about the second paragraph, the in-text citations. There's another way in which you can use sources and in-text citations, and that is something that is called back-to-back citations. Back-to-back citations means that you've found one source and you've done a paraphrase for it. For example, the Hendricks and Quinn in-text citation here. And then in the next sentence or the next clause, you've found a second source, in this case Duff et al., that is introducing some more supporting information. It's not exactly the same as the Hendricks and Quinn. That's why it is separated. That is called back-to-back in-text citations. I am not expecting you to do this and demonstrate this in your report. Some of you will not understand this, but other students, maybe you are thinking, oh yeah, well, I sort of understand that. I might try it out. That will help you be more successful in the future. Or Ibrahim, that's a complicated question you've got there. I'm not sure what you mean by introduction from a different author. Yeah, are you talking about the citation stacking here? Just say yes or no or thumbs up.
I think better is to speak. And I can ask you through, yeah.
Do you want to ask me?
Yeah,
now?
Actually, I'm meaning introduction. So that's maybe the idea or subtopic, like introducing the topic or introducing the idea in the paragraph. Like for example, I'm asking the one part of the paragraph is from a different author. The other part of the paragraph, like kind of a supporting points of the paragraph, is from a different author. And also,
sure,
I can give an example from different authors, so I can make that combined.
Absolutely right.
Right. Okay.
Absolutely. Yeah. Good. But I'm gonna say absolutely right. So Ibrahim's trying to use multiple paraphrases and in-text citations in the one paragraph. The problem for our report is the word count. So you have to be very skilled at doing that in an academic paragraph. That is, nearly every sentence has an in-text citation in it, because there are lots of problems that introduces when you are not, when you don't have those skills to introduce those ideas and connect them together. I'm going to introduce the example structure for an academic paragraph next week, because we'll be focusing on the second part of the report, which is 2.0, and I will talk about that in more detail, and you can listen to that and come back with some more questions about that. That's no problem, because I think that's a very good question. The problem is that if you don't have the skills to do that or the practice, it can cause some other problems, which we will talk about next week when we talk about the structure of academic paragraphs. All right, let's have a look, and I'm keeping an eye on time here because I want to go into the instructions for the 3A report as well. Let's have a look at an example of the correct way to direct quote. Firstly, a small section only is selected as a quotation. We never quote a full sentence unless you're an expert, and experts generally don't do that. B, the authors of the claim are acknowledged. The acknowledgement comes with an in-text citation. Example number 1 is an example of a large part of the original sentence is quoted, and it has the in-text citation in the brackets at the end. We want to avoid doing this type of direct quote. Number 2 is a lot better, because number 2, it is a direct quote because it is focusing on an idea, which is high achievers. That idea is directly copied from the secondary source of Krauss et al., and it has the quotation mark or inverted commas around it. That's the best way to do a direct quote, a very short phrase or couple of words. The rest of the sentence is the student's, or in this case, Turner et al.'s sentence. Also have a look at how the claim is acknowledged. We have the author's name outside of the brackets and it is part of the sentence. I want to show you a few ways in which we can integrate the author's name in our sentences in a moment. So remember, we want to avoid direct quotes that quote large parts of a sentence or a complete sentence. We want to focus on the idea rather than the sentence. Let's now have a look at paraphrasing. A, we select the idea from the secondary source, just like when we were selecting a supporting point. B, the idea is paraphrased to show the link to your argument. That is connecting to reconstructing and your critical thinking. And C, the author or authors of the claim are acknowledged. So again, we've written a paraphrase from the same idea in the previous slide, but in this case, we've rephrased it to suit our own purpose. You'll notice that in-text citations should really have a page number wherever you use them. APA says that the rule is for direct quotes, you must have a page number. For paraphrases, the page number is optional. However, I always suggest to students to include the page number wherever you can. Look, I know there are some ebooks, it's very difficult to find the page number. You can only do what you can do in that case. So for paraphrasing, let's go through the checklist of what you need to do. You want to paraphrase the claim or the idea or the supporting point. There's various words that we use for those. Claim is a stronger word. It's linked to an argument about something. So we often use claims when we are writing academic paragraphs. Firstly, understand the claim. That is the deconstructing and reconstructing the idea. 2, recognize any disciplinary terminology that may need to be kept in your rewriting of the paraphrase. What do we mean by that? For some faculties, there is specific terms used that you don't want to change, and you will copy those terms in, and you will use the inverted commas just like I used in one of those previous examples for a direct quote. For this unit, there's no real disciplinary terminology, so you don't have to worry about that too much. But in some of your other units, there may be more specific professional type of terminology. Number 3, write in your own words for your own purpose. That's difficult for students. It's connected to critical thinking. You can only really do that when you close your secondary source once you've found the idea. It's really hard if you keep looking at the paragraph where you got the idea from and look at the other sentences, because it will confuse your paraphrase and it will make your ideas unclear in your paragraphs. You really do need to understand the idea first and critically think about it to write your paraphrase effectively. And don't forget about acknowledging the source, which we're going to have a look at in a moment. Let's have a look at the difference between the in-text citation and the reference, or the similarities too. The in-text citation are short acknowledgements of each of the sources within your text. Whenever you use another idea that is not your own, you must use an in-text citation. Each in-text citation that you use must have a corresponding reference entry in the reference list. Just like I do with my PowerPoint slides, you will find on this one, it's from QUT SiteWrite, you will find a reference entry at the end on the reference list that matches this in-text citation. There's 3 reasons why we need a reference that is on the reference list. The first is to acknowledge and give credit to somebody else. That's a very academic thing to do. To go, no, it's not my idea. It is from this other person, but I've analysed this idea a little bit further, and we're going to talk about analysis next week. Second reason for a reference is to help the other readers find the original facts and ideas that you've used in the secondary source. The in-text citation doesn't give enough information for us to find the secondary source if we need to, but the reference list does. Point number 3 is to show readers how great you are at research. So it shows your depth and your quality of research that you've demonstrated to complete that assignment. It's the same in the real world. The more references we use in the correct way, the higher the academic and the professional ideas come across for the reader of your project. Let's have a look at the 3 different ways to incorporate a secondary source using the in-text citation. We'll go to the last one first because we've been talking about this one when we focused on our PPT slides, and that was the in-text citation. Everything is in the brackets. The family name, the date, and the page number. You'll notice that if it is a family, if it is more than 3 authors for a source, we use the first author name, in this case, Turner, and then we use et al. The complete authors for Turner is Turner, Krennis, Ireland, and Poynton. So APA rules say that we don't use all of the authors' family names in the in-text citation. That's too complicated. We only need the first name. If there is one author name, then it will just be the one author name, in this case, Greetham. If there are 2 author names, then we will use both author names in our writing, and it might be Greetham and Jones, for example. But 3 or more, we use et al. I've got ahead of myself there. I'm just going to go back to the bottom example. There's an error that lots of students make. Please don't make this error, and that is the positioning of the full stop. If you use the last form of in-text citation where everything's in the brackets at the end of the sentence, make sure there is only one full stop after the in-text citation. We do not have a full stop before the in-text citation there, okay? Let's have a look at the 2 other ways we can incorporate the author's name. Now, these are more academic, so I've left them to now. The first is using the author's family name outside the brackets with a verb that comes after the bracketed date and page number. In the example, it says, Greetham advises. Then you come up with your paraphrased claim. Just remember that the verb is always in the present tense. It's not in the past tense. If it was Greetham and Jones, it would be advise if there is a plural authors used. The second academic way to incorporate the author's name is using the phrase according to. We just have to remember a couple of changes to our sentence structure when we use according to. I'll come back to that question. We use the author's family name after according to, so according to Greetham, and then in the brackets we have the year and the page number, and then we come to a noun verb clause. So there must be a noun first. In this case, it's students, and then the verb. And then we go into the idea that you are paraphrasing. I'll come to that question. Any questions on these in-text citation examples? That's a good question though for the main room there, Karam. And can you copy that? Don't rewrite it, just copy and paste it into the main room and then I'll answer that. Let's see, let's go to the next slide with a little bit more information. Okay, I'll do it. With a little bit more information on the verbs, okay, because the verbs are really important. And the verbs, what I mean by the verbs here are the verbs like advises in the first example at the top of that slide. We want verbs that are strong. So for example, the verbs asserts, claims, states and argues are strong verbs that we want to use a lot when we are integrating our authors' names. There are some other verbs that we can use, such as affirms or substantiates or verifies is a good one, but those verbs are when we write our paraphrase when we're agreeing with evidence. So we might say Johnson and Jones verifies that for students to be successful, they must plan to complete their projects. So that secondary source is agreeing with the idea that I have in the paraphrase. The last column there I've included from SiteRight, which is focusing on refuting existing evidence. This is when we look at, we compare and contrast the ideas in various sources. We don't do that in this unit. If you're in QCD110, you will do that, whether it's this semester or next semester. Then we will use some of those verbs. And maybe in some of your other assignments, you are using some of those verbs, or you are looking for differences between authors and what they're saying. Then you will use the verbs in the last column. So I've just left it there for your own knowledge. Maybe you can use those in your other units, but we don't need to use those that last column in this unit. I'm just putting in Karam's question here. Karam's question is asking about using secondary sources that are in your own language, which I think is a very valid question. You want to avoid using secondary sources in your own language. That's all I can say. If you were in it's a good question though, because you need to know one of the reasons why. The main reason why is when you're in a Western university, you must use the primary language for that university. Now, often, if it is an academic text and it is a valuable text, meaning it's reliable, then it will also be copied into English, because obviously they're going to make more contacts for themselves, the researchers, by publishing it in English as well. So I would be looking for the English version, and if there is none, then I would not be using that secondary source. Also, another reason is you want to be practicing your academic English language as well. All right, let's now, before seeing how we're going for time, we're right on time, Craig, which is good. I want to open a couple of the sources for the 3A preliminary report. So let's do that now. I'll come to that question in a minute. Let's go to 3A. Gee, we can leave the oral presentation for now. The task sheet is there, and we have 3 resources available to you. The first resource is the instructions document for the preliminary report, and that was introduced last week. I think there was also some e-content for you to work on for the preliminary report instructions. The second resource is the template, which I'm going to show you in a moment, and then there's the research table. I won't be opening the research table this week. We'll be focusing more on the research table in the workshop next week, but I've opened it now for you to use if you need to. Let's just have another look at the instructions document. If you want to, you can open the instructions document and you can maybe make some notes on the instructions document if you like. We briefly looked at this last week, but we didn't go into any detail. The opening of the research report, and remembering you should have already scanned through this document, it was part of the content. The opening is identifying why do we use reports, which I did mention at the beginning of the workshop today, and also a connection there to secondary research using the library catalogue. The scenario is very important for us, and I'm going to have a look at that now. Let us get someone to read out the scenario, the first 2 paragraphs. Maybe we will go to Vin. Vin, do you want to read out the first 2 paragraphs for us? Great, thank you for that. And I know Ibrahim's put in another question, which I'll come to in a moment. That opening paragraph of the scenario, remember, is focusing on the broad topic, such as education in general, how it's valuable for all individuals and communities. It's very broad, the introduction here. It connects further into higher education and how that can help success. And then it narrows down to students in Australian universities. Great. It's important to be aware of what we mean by broad to narrow. It was, and it is, one of the academic language features that we introduced in the earlier part of the semester. But to understand broad to narrow helps you in 2 main ways. The first is that any paragraph that you write focuses on the broad to the narrow. And also any assignment or genre of writing focuses in the structure of the whole assignment, or the whole genre focuses on the broad to the narrow. And reports are exactly the same. The 1.0 introduction section of the report, which you are going to practice in the tutorial this week, is developing the main paragraph 1.1 on the broad to the narrow. So you need to understand that. This is a very good example on the development in this scenario of the broad to the narrow. And I think I might just read out the next paragraph here, or we might run out of time. So in the scenario, which is setting us up for the focus of this assignment, the report, now we are narrowing down. In order to succeed in an Australian university, international students need to learn content knowledge. So we've got the connection narrowed down now, not just to students, as in the previous paragraph, but to international students, specifically about content knowledge. However, just as importantly, students must also develop skills related to their chosen discipline. So now we are narrowing even further, and we are focusing on your faculty area of study. Additionally, research by Emblem Perry confirms the value of integrating universal skills when encouraging students' academic success. So now we're talking about these skills in more detail, and about how some skills can be required across many disciplines. Many skills may be generic and therefore cross-disciplinary, meaning they can be used across all studies at university, while other skills are specific to particular faculties and must be developed to successfully complete the course of study. We will be talking about some of these skills, which are the best skills to use for your report in the tutorial this week. The last paragraph narrows down to the client again. Remember, QT College Management is the client who we are working for all of our assignments for this unit. Don't think of yourself as a student. Think of yourself as a researcher. QT College Management has contracted you to investigate 4 academic skills. We're developing on from the oral presentation, which focused on one subtopic for each speaker. But now, each student or each researcher is focusing on 4 subtopics or 4 academic skills, which diploma students require to be successful in their chosen faculty. That's another requirement for the research report. You are analysing and critically thinking about each of your academic skills or subtopics and how students use that in their faculty studies. Each unit that you enroll in your faculty will use skills in different ways based on the content of your faculty studies. So you are arguing why your selected academic skills are the most important for students in your faculty. That's a good point. As part of your investigation, we have now the client's name. The client's name is Mr. Ken Butel, who is the director of QT College. And we'll talk about the recommendations later on in the semester. They're not required for the 3A preliminary report. The reason why this section is important is because this week you are going to write the paragraph 1.1 background. So you need to know about broad to narrow skills. And we'll talk more about that in the tutorial. I could talk about those now, but I'd go over time. So for the 3A preliminary report, you are focusing on two sections. The first section of the report is 1.0 introduction, and the second section of the report is 2.0 discussion. There are another two sections of the report, but that will not be completed until the 3B final report. Your tutor will focus on 1.0, which is on the next page, in the tutorial this week. So they'll go through these details, not next week, this week. They'll go through this checklist with you for 1.0 in the tutorial this week. They meaning could be me, could be Loretta, could be Tim. All right, one other source I want to open, and that is the template. So let's open that now. Oh, and I have got your question there too, which I will answer. But no, there is no comma there. I'll open up SiteWrite for you to show you that too. Now, this is the template, which was the second resource available to you in the Blackboard folder. This template you will download and you will complete, focusing on each section of the report. The template is already formatted, so it has the headings, it has the table of contents, the title page, and so on for you to complete. It's got the page numbers already started, a place for your references, and also a place for your for you to complete the feedback and reflection form. This document is what you will complete and upload to Turnitin before that Thursday in week, when is it? Week 9. Just remember, you are the researcher. Your name goes there. You are working for an organisation. You create the name of your organisation and you put it underneath your name. We're not students in the scenario here. We are researchers. You can create your own organisation and pretend you work for your own organisation. Great. Or you can work for somebody else and use that organisation's name. I don't really care what organisation name you use, as long as it's a professional organisation name. Try not to use QUT, because we want to get away from using university. We want to try to get into the real world as much as possible. The client details I already read out for you on the first page of the instructions. The title is connecting to the semester topic and your faculty. That's what the marker is looking for and the client is looking for in the title there. So yes, Vin's question, yes, as soon as the Turnitin link is open, you can submit and resubmit. Just be very careful about submitting multiple times on the due date, the day that an assignment is due, because sometimes Turnitin is a bit temperamental and it might take a few hours for it to allow a second or a subsequent resubmission. But leading up to the due date, yes, no problem. That's a very good question, Ibrahim, about the according to. I'm just going to show you QUT SiteWrite for a moment. Look, QUT SiteWrite according to, they don't have a comma here at all in their example. Word might come up with a comma after the bracket, but I can't see in the examples that QUT SiteWrite uses that it does require a comma. So good question. I wouldn't be marking it incorrect if you did put a comma in there. Yeah. The link to this SiteWrite page. Well, in actual fact, Oh, really? Okay. You know how I link to SiteRight really quickly? I just type in a Google or a Bing search, APA QUT, and it takes me straight away to QT SiteRight. So you don't have to be logged in all the time as well. I think I do have a link to it in the instructions document as well. Yeah, there is a link to the library catalog and also QUT SiteRight on the second page if you want to. I'm sure that link still works. Yeah. You might want to also start thinking about your researching. You do need the minimum of 5 academic sources, either ebooks or journal articles, for the 3A preliminary report as well. Any other questions? Good, I like the questions. Okay, thanks everybody. I'll either see you in your tutorial, or I will send an announcement out at the end of the week just to remind you about anything you need to be working on. If you haven't completed the Padlet post, yeah, okay, Karan. If you haven't completed the Padlet post yet about the academic skills, then please do that before your tutorial. Thanks, everyone. I'm going to... Oh, do you want to just speak to me with everyone else here, Karam, or do you want me to put you in a breakout group? Is everyone hanging around now wanting to know? Okay, thanks, everyone. I'm just going to go into a breakout group now.